Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. As someone who was screaming about this from the rooftops at the time, I can count on one hand the number of my colleagues from the other side who joined in expressing any concern about the former president inviting the Taliban to Camp David or the shameful surrender agreement that undoubtedly set us on the path to this tragedy. And if anybody believes that the previous administration would have evacuated any Afghans to the United States, much less tens of thousands, as President Biden did, I would suggest that they ask the Kurds their opinion of that. That said, those of us who've been consistent about this, I think, are entitled to say that it was also a mistake for this administration to pick up where President Trump left off. It's certainly true that we were never going to be able to fix what was wrong with Afghanistan. That doesn't mean that we were obliged to sacrifice everything that was right with Afghanistan. And the sacrifice, I think, is profound. An extremely important counterterrorism partnership was lost, and a terrorist state is now upon us. Enormous gains for women, for the rule of law, for democracy, for human rights, mass displacement. The Afghans remade their society. We didn't do it, they did. It was our withdrawal, I am afraid, that has unmade their society. And what have we gained for this? Our troops are not coming home. We need to be honest about that. They're merely moving to other bases in the same region to conduct the same counterterrorism missions, including in Afghanistan, but from a longer distance with no partners on the ground, no NATO allies on the ground, presumably more civilian casualties. That drone strike in Kabul was not the last act of our war. It was unfortunately the first act of the next stage of our war. Now, I don't want to ask you to respond to all of that. I think this is just a philosophical difference that will have to rest. I do want to ask you, Mr. Secretary, about the next stage of this evacuation to which I know you're committed. There was one Afghan woman in particular that I worked to get out, one of many. An activist, I won't name her, she was on social media, interviewed by the international media a lot, tremendously at risk, tried to get to the airport several times, once got on a bus that a third country had organized, was taken off that bus. And again, to be honest, we in the very short time we had before August 31st, we were never able to make the evacuation of those Afghans at risk a priority. The message that we got from the State Department was if they got to HKIA, we would try to evacuate them, but that they were in effect on their own to get them or dependent on private groups to get there. My question for you today, very practically, is whether with this new phase, with most Americans out, with the airport restarting operations, whether the State Department will proactively prioritize trying to get individuals like that women's rights activist out. And let me say what I mean by that specifically. Will the State Department, for example, reach out to all the private groups and NGOs that have been working on this to try to consolidate and rationalize these lists that they have and that you have? Will you work to try to proactively contact these people to get them visas either to the United States or visas that we can encourage third countries to give them, and would we work then proactively with countries like Qatar that are still in place to try to arrange for safe rides to the airport?
Congressman, in short, yes. And I think we do have to do everything we can to bring some of these lists together to the extent that hasn't happened, and ultimately to prioritize those who are most at risk. Our priorities going forward are, of course, on any remaining American citizens who wish to leave, as well as on the special immigrant visa applicants who worked side by side with us over the years, and Afghans at risk. And I think we do need to make sure that we're looking at everything that different organizations are providing, members of Congress are providing, so that we can identify those who we believe to be at the highest risk, and we can focus on that population.
Thank you. What I'm hoping is that you're very proactive about this rather than putting the burden on them to find a way out of the country first. And then finally, very quickly, I know you've surged all kinds of personnel to Germany and to other places where people we evacuated on our planes came out. Are you willing to do the same for Afghans who were brought by private groups to countries like Albania?
we want to make sure that we have in place, wherever necessary, the personnel required to help process people and to make sure that we can do what checks are necessary, and then also to support their efforts to move from their initial landing place to an ultimate destination.
Thank you.